Hi everyone, I'm Meghan Sullivan, and welcome to the pilot episode of History in Games, a podcast where I play historical fiction games and talk about the real history behind the game. Today, I thought it would be really fun to talk about my favorite game of 2018, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And don't worry, there are no spoilers for the game. So, if you haven't played it yet, you can listen to this episode worry-free. Also, please go play the game. It's really fun. And no, I'm not sponsored by Ubisoft. This is History in Games. Okay, so Assassin's Creed Odyssey. As I was saying in the opening, it's my game of 2018. And the reason is, well, first off, it's just a really great open-world action RPG. But I think what really made it special for me is the fact that it takes place in ancient Greece during the 5th century BCE, which just happens to be my historical forte. But there was something interesting about the story that really caught my attention. And I promise this is not a spoiler, it's in the official game description. And that is the revelation that the main protagonists are descendants of the legendary Spartan King Leonidas, who famously died at the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BCE, defending Greece against the invading Persian Empire. Now, you probably already know a little bit about this battle because you either read Herodotus and/or you might have seen a movie called 300. And yes, I know, that movie is not very accurate. But hey, it was based off a comic book, and besides, it was a fun movie, come on. Now, the heroes of Assassin's Creed Odyssey are fictional characters, so the developers at Ubisoft can make them related to King Leonidas however they want, which is what they did, and it was great. But as I was playing the game, I couldn't help but wonder if the real Leonidas had real relatives running around Greece as mercenaries during the Peloponnesian War, just like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I mean, stranger things have happened, right? So, just for fun, I actually did some research on that. I scoured Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, Aristophanes, Plutarch, Plato, Pausanias, Diodorus, Aristotle, etc., and guess what? It turns out, it is possible. And I thought that would make for a really interesting discussion. So, come with me as we hop into the Animus and travel back in time 2,500 years to ancient Sparta to learn more about the heroic King Leonidas, his literally crazy family, and how there could have been a real-life Misthios related to them all. Before I go any further, I'd just like to mention I do not speak fluent Greek, so I apologize in advance to native speakers if my pronunciation is a bit off. I did reach out to native speakers about proper pronunciation, so even if I don't get it 100% right, I'm hoping to get close. For the sake of clarity, however, I did decide to keep the American pronunciation for Herodotus and Thucydides, since a lot of English speakers are used to hearing it that way. I also chose to call the country Greece over the native word Hellas for similar reasons. But hey, native Greek speakers, feel free to contact me about how to say these names properly, and I'll happily keep that in mind going forward. So, with that, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the show. As we travel back in time to ancient Sparta, let's take a moment to talk about the story of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And again, I promise no spoilers, so no worries. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you play a Spartan mercenary fighting your way through Greece during the Second Peloponnesian War. This epic war is between Athens' Delian League and Sparta's Peloponnesian League. Your job as a player is to uncover the mystery of who's manipulating the war behind the scenes, while at the same time deciding whether or not to side with democratic Athens or militaristic Sparta as the two city-states battle for control over the entire Aegean. All this while trying to reunite with your estranged Spartan family. At the start of the game, you'll have two protagonists to choose from, Alexios and his sister Cassandra. They're both said to be the direct descendants of the heroic King Leonidas, and depending on which character you choose, one of them has inherited Leonidas' spear from the Battle of Thermopylae. This spear not only helps your character completely obliterate their enemies, its strange powers also help to unravel the mystery of what's really going on in the world, past, present, and future. And that all sounds pretty fantastic, right? Which is why it's so exciting to find historical evidence that a real-life Alexios and Cassandra might have existed, even though their names were probably not Alexios and Cassandra, since they couldn't find either name in any historical records about Sparta. Whatever, they're still cool names. But of course their existence raises a number of crucial questions, like, if there was a real Alexios and Cassandra, how are they related to Leonidas? why would they be mercenaries? How come we've never heard of them? Well, in order to tackle all of these questions, I decided to break up this lesson into 3 separate podcasts. This first podcast deals with Alexios and Cassandra's real-life royal lineage. I'll not only prove that it's possible for a real-life Alexios and Cassandra to have existed, I'll show you all the different ways that it was possible for them to be related to Leonidas. In the second podcast, I'll deal with their mercenary status, which has real historical precedence. And the third podcast will deal with their unusual spear. And yes, there's a whole segment dedicated just to that, because it's not quite as ridiculous as you might think. But fair warning, the real history is even crazier than the game. Okay, ready? Let's go. So we're starting with Alexios and Cassandra's royal lineage because, hey, they're not just any Spartan mercenaries, they're royal Spartan mercenaries, thank you very much. Now, in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, our protagonists are said to be the direct descendants of Leonidas, which begs the question, is it possible for a real-life Alexios and Cassandra to be direct descendants of Leonidas, as in his children, or grandchildren, or even great-grandchildren? And the answer is no! You see, King Leonidas had only one child that we know of, a son named Plistarchos, and unfortunately we know from ancient sources that Plistarchos died young with no heirs sometime around 458 BCE, which means Plistarchos died nearly 30 years before the events of AC Odyssey. And if Leonidas had had a daughter, I'm sure she would have been important enough for historical authors to mention, particularly Herodotus. He was fascinated by strong, independent women. For example, in his histories, he talks a lot about Leonidas' wife, the smart and sassy Queen Gorgo, and he also talks about Atossa, one of Persia's most powerful and influential queens. So if Leonidas had ever had a daughter, I feel like Herodotus of all people would have mentioned her. But no such daughter appears in any historical record. So unfortunately, with Plistarchos dead and no other heirs available, Leonidas' direct living legacy comes to an end. And that's kind of sad. I mean, who's going to continue the proud tradition of screaming, "This is Sparta!" and kicking some poor Persian messenger down a well? Which, by the way, according to Herodotus, actually did happen. But it was during Persia's first attempt at invading Greece in 490 BCE, and it was probably Leonidas' crazy older brother who was responsible for that, and we'll get to him in a second. But if it's impossible for a real-life Alexios and Cassandra to have been directly related to Leonidas, would it be possible for them to have been related via a close relative? Yes, and that's what we're going to explore today. There are actually 4 real-life possible ancestors of Alexios and Cassandra, and they're all pretty darn interesting. But in order to fully understand their incredible real-life story, I've set the animus back 100 years before the Second Peloponnesian War. And here we are in ancient Sparta. It's the mid-6th century BCE, and we're about to meet the future hero king Leonidas and his royal brothers, the Anaxandridae. Their story not only sets up all the different ways Alexios and Cassandra could have been related to Leonidas, it also shows us how incredibly fascinating real-life history can be. You see, the story of King Anaxandridas and his 4 warrior sons is full of sex, violence, intrigue, insanity, and incredible courage. I know, it sounds like something out of Greek mythology, right? Well, guess what? All of it is true.